Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I wanted to name a few things right up front. One, I'm speaking English. Sorry, I'm not fluent in Icelandic, so hopefully you can take a little break and listen to me in English. Two, I'm American. I speak very fast, so I'm going to try to speak very slow, so hopefully you can understand me a little bit better. And three, I always wear hats. I do that for a number of reasons. It's not disrespect. It's not, well, it is sort of to be different. But you can see I'm wearing a hat in that picture, too. A lot of the youth that I work with are inner city youth. They wear hats, they wear Jordans, they wear certain styles, right? I try not to copy them, but I try to have some sort of homage to the youth that I work with. And so the hat is that. I also thought a conference about sport and leisure, a hat might fit, too. So we're going to talk to you a little bit around youth, disaster, and some possibilities that we see to move forward here in Iceland. So I'm going to talk to you about young people in disaster. This is Grindavik. You can see there's some youth walking along a path. We'll tell more of the story, but we connected some of the youth from Grindavik. They hadn't been back. They hadn't seen each other in a long time. We went back with them and asked them to take us simply on a tour of the places that they loved and the places that they missed. And this is one of the places, sort of an outdoor nature area. But as you can see, the youth are just together, walking together, being together. And that's an important part of this that we'll keep continuing to talk about. So very quickly, who am I? I'm a professor. I'm Dane Stickney. I'm a professor at University of Colorado at Denver. So Denver, Colorado is sort of in the middle of the United States in the mountains. Denver is its capital, and I teach in Denver. It's a diverse place. My main job that I do is teaching teachers. So I support social studies teachers to be classroom teachers. But my research is part of this group. It's called Transformative Student Voice. Our website is here. And then we also, as was noted in the introduction, we have a couple books that came out through Harvard Education Press. And I was lead author of our teacher-facing book, Transformative Student Voice for Teachers, A Guide to Classroom Action. The book tells it all, right? But if I wanted to boil it down, what is it? What do we do? We engage, okay, I'll get there in just a minute. We engage youth in sort of identifying problems and sort of empowering them to move forward. Before we sort of thought about doing that with the youth in Grindavik, we wanted to understand disaster literature. So there's a whole field of study called disaster studies. Not very cheery, but there's a whole field of study called disaster studies. And wanting to support the youth in Grindavik, we wanted to educate ourselves in that field. What is disaster studies? What are some things that we should know? We are still learning, we're curious, but some of the things that are emerging for us as we do this work, the literature tends to avoid the term natural disaster. Even a volcano, even a landslide, they see that as having a man-made impact, right? We don't study necessarily just the volcano. We study how we, as human beings, respond to the volcano, right? So it was interesting to me that the term natural disaster was sort of frowned upon, which is interesting. Youth have unique concerns. They're young, they're developing. In some ways, they're more vulnerable. In some ways, they're more resilient. But they're rarely consulted. Rarely do people go to the youth and ask them what they're feeling, what they want, what they need in the disaster. And then youth are especially susceptible to post-traumatic stress and other mental health concerns. They're away from their home. They're away from their social systems. They're away from their friends. That's difficult. And then going through something like an evacuation, you can have post-traumatic stress after that. Holding all this dear, realizing this, right, thinking about this, we thought, what might it look like to meaningfully involve youth before, during, and after disasters? And the way that we thought we would do that is using an approach called Youth Participatory Action Research, also referred to as YPAR. So very quickly, action research is the iterative nature of finding a problem and working with it. If we add participatory, that means the people that are affected by a problem are the ones doing that action research. And if we layer on youth, right, it's the youth who are affected by a problem doing that research. I'll very quickly talk about the framework, but then we'll sort of talk about how we might think it might empower the youth in Grindavik. So it starts with building community, right? Whenever we're doing any type of work together, we must build community, trust, that type of stuff. You'll hear from some other people who've done some work in Grindavik, like Ellenborg and other people in the room who have really worked hard to build and hold on to community with the Grindavik youth. But once we have that community, how can we position the youth to identify a problem? And I'll talk about what that problem is in a minute. Certainly it's the volcano, right? But I think there's other problems we could do some research around that would be interesting related to that. Then we explore the root causes. How do these problems live around us in social and historical ways? Then the youth themselves actually become researchers. They collect data. Often that means interviewing each other, figuring out how each other are living the experience. They analyze the data, they use that to develop a policy, and then they push adults to actually implement that policy to make it work. So that's the framework of YPAR. In Denver, where I work, we've used this in a variety of ways: to change curriculum, to get police out of schools, to change school lunch, to push back on uniform policies, to make streets safer. These are all things we've used it for in Denver, but we're curious, what might this framework do in the hands of the youth of Grindavik? So building community, like I said, beautiful work has already been done and is being done right now to make sure that the youth keep their bond. It's difficult. They've been spread to anywhere from 60 to 70 different schools. That's hard to keep that connection. So people are trying to keep that connection. This picture here is of the Grindavik Soccer House, which is another place where the youth took us as an important place in Grindavik. And you can see the silhouettes of the youth. I just thought it was a beautiful way that both the soccer house represented a sense of community, a place of community, but you can see the silhouettes of the youth coming together. Just wanted to acknowledge building community and the work that's already being done. Then identifying a problem. So what might that problem be? Certainly the volcano, right? But I'm not sure if there's any research we can do that can stop tectonic plates or stop fissures from opening or redirect lava, perhaps, right? That's not the type of research I'm especially interested in with the youth of Grindavik. I would like them to identify a problem or a tension in their life right now and have them explore it. One that's clearly emerging is, should we go back? Should we not go back? I want to go back. Is it safe to go back? That's a tension that's all over the place. So these quotes are from an article from the Associated Press that was published, I believe, about a year ago, in which they interviewed some Grindavik youth. But as you can see, one of the youth said about leaving, when we had to leave, we had 5 minutes to get our stuff. And you can see some of the images of Grindavik. Again, relates to that post-traumatic stress. But then they have desires, right? So this particular youth said, I know many kids want to come back, and we're hearing that from a lot of the Grindavik youth that we're interacting with, but we're also hearing that some youth are comfortable where they move to, and we're hearing that some youth may not have the opportunity to move back because their parents don't want to move back. So there's a lot of tensions around. There's a desire to go back. Can we go back? Should we go back? How should we go back? It's still a tension that they're trying to figure out, but we believe it's one that YPAR could help them figure out. So then they need to explore the causes and the roots, the causes and the symptoms of the problem. So if they want to go back, what might the roots of that problem be? And if they're not able to go back, is it national policy that might be hurting them from going back? Is it local policy that might not be able to support them in going back? Is it something around schools? Is it something else? So whatever problem they would pick, they could investigate the roots of those problems that would help them return to Grindavik. The coolest part of YPAR is students research their own lived experiences. So one really cool thing that we did when we took the youth back to Grindavik is we were able to go into the school that they had been attending before the evacuation. So in a lot of cases, like in this image, the students hadn't seen the school or their schoolwork in more than a year. They had just evacuated. And so we got back into the school, and it was very interesting. There was no power. There were no teachers. There were no adults. The students were able to just kind of explore. It reminded me almost of like archaeology. They were going around with their iPhones kind of shining. But this students had built a game kind of patterned after the game of life. At least that's what they call it in the United States. Might have a different name here. But she had made a game, right? And she was in the midst of making a game. But then they had to evacuate, and she came back to this, a year later, and she was like, oh, the game, and she started playing the game. It was just really neat to see something she had made with her hands that was not fully finished, but was still sort of an artifact living in this abandoned space. It was fascinating, right? That's exploring lived experiences, but I'm also interested, what would it look like for this student to interview other students, or older students to interview younger students, or older Grindavik citizens talking to the younger ones? What might we start to generate about our lived experience? How did we experience the volcano? How are we experiencing the evacuations? What are our desires? What are our fears, right? All of that stuff could come up in this research. And again, we want the youth to be the drivers of the research. We're here to help. We want them to actually do that work and tell us what they're finding out. Then we want them to analyze the data for patterns and themes. Data is interesting. You get data, you look at it for a while, and something new might emerge. This picture is that way for me. At first glance, this picture, it appears that nothing's wrong. But if you look, the gray house over here, its foundation is pretty shifted, and that house is not safe to go into. Yet, just a few feet over, this house is unharmed, and they've deemed that it is safe to live in that house. And so, similar to the way that we look at data and we see patterns and themes that emerge, it's similar here. Like, in one area we lose a house, in another area we don't. That's interesting, right? It's unexpected, but it takes some looking, it takes some thinking, it takes some analysis, and that's how we see the research process work too. So when the youth interview each other, elevate these lived experiences, we also want them to do really rigorous data analysis, right? What patterns and themes are you seeing? What is true in the data? What are findings that we can take to lawmakers, powerful adults, and use that evidence to try to get the policy that we want? What might that policy be? They want to be connected. And this is where I think it really makes sense with this conference. They want access to sports again. They want to practice sports with their friends. And it also connects to school. They want to go to school with their friends. So the way we ended our trip to Grindavik is that we just went to the sports fields. We let them play. We played with them, and it was beautiful. This is the soccer field, and if you know anything about the Grindavik fissures, that soccer field is actually, it has a fissure running through the middle of it. So if I could move this camera, you would see a huge gash in the earth in that soccer field. Playing basketball here, a huge part of the Grindavik culture. And then we also took them to get ice cream, right? That's just part of leisure, part of being together. So in many ways, I'm seeing through the youth of Grindavik, what we do in our free time, what we do with our interest defines us. And when you're evacuated from your hometown, you might not have access to those passions. You might not have access to that leisure. The students miss that, the youth miss that, and they want that back. They've not done this full process with fidelity yet, so we don't know exactly what they're going to demand. We don't know exactly what problem they're going to look at, nor what research they're going to do, nor what they're going to find. Just in interacting with the youth over the past year or so, we do see two emerging demands really starting to come to the floor. So the first is they want to attend to the same school again. Right now they're spread across several schools. It sounds like that's going to happen. It sounds like there's going to be an option in the fall for the school to open. Exactly how many kids will be there, what grades it will be, that's still unclear. But it seems like we're trending that way. Cool. But again, I'll wrap up, sorry. It's trending that way. But again, we want to help them in that process. We hope that when they're opening the school, we hope that the youth are consulted before, during, and after that process. The other thing is they want the shared sports practices. Grindavik has a rich sports culture. The kids play for different towns now. They want to go back and play under the Grindavik banner, and they want to go back and play with their Grindavik colleagues. In general, they want access to social and leisure opportunities. We're really excited what they're going to find, and we're excited that we know what they're going to do is going to have an impact in Grindavik. We're hopeful that what we learned from Grindavik could be shared with other youth councils in Iceland. And we're hopeful what we learn around youth being consulted around disaster could apply to global situations. We're living in a world right now where we see climate change, we see more natural disasters, a word I shouldn't use. We also see more like war and things like that. How could we learn from this framework and the resilience of the Grindavik youth to support other youth in the future to face landslides, war, famine, those types of things? Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it. You'll hear more about Grindavik. Thank you so much.